eh. Wait a minute. Get it how you live it. 10 toes in when we're standing on business. I'm a big stepper, underground methods. I'm not sure the wasn't Alyssa. Bitch, I don't give a fuck about what you say. Ugh. Ugh. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I could do this.
Avatarists say this is officially, but only that the next Avatar series will be set in a cyber in the future, almost 100 years. So what inspired me to make this video was actually a good friend of mine, one of the biggest Avatar YouTube channels out there in the Avatarist.
Hello?
His most recent video has a similar conversation about the future of the next Avatar series, and when he brought up the rumor of it being set in a cyberpunk-like sci-fi setting, it inspired me to make a video discussing what that could mean for what we could see happen. I had not known that information before seeing his new video, and so I think it inspires a really interesting conversation here within this video that I want to have with you all. I'm going to play a few snippets from his videos.
Cadbury Dairy Milk Hazelnut.
You guys, ever since I was little, I've loved movies about shrinking people and miniature people and people holding smaller people in their hand and people going inside people. And throughout cinematic history, there have been absolute classics like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids to present-day blockbusters like Ant-Man. But it doesn't stop there. Horton Hears a Who, MIB, Downsizing, and so much more we'll get into today. In this video, let's take a closer look at the visual and practical effects of how each movie showed shrinking and miniaturization. So unlock that cupboard, swallow that school bus, and let's get small. First, let's go down the rabbit hole and visit 1951's Alice in Wonderland, who was able to shrink with an unusual potion.
Tastes like cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey. Goodness!
To create trippy visuals like these, Disney would first film something called live-action reference, using actors to play out the scene, then handing it all off to the animators to create pencil tests, which were then photographed frame by frame. It took forever, and everyone probably got carpal tunnel syndrome, but the end result gave us the OG shrinking moment. Fast forward to the live-action version, and Tim Burton put his own spin on it. This shot was deceptively simple to accomplish. All they had to do on set was raise the camera higher to give us the illusion that she was shrinking away from us. And after creating a CG dress falling over her at its original size, they put her head back on and boom, $1 billion at the box office and just so much Hot Topic merch. But before we had fancy things like 3D software, movies had to get a little creative. While on vacation with his wife, Scott passes through a strange mist that ends up rearranging his molecular structure. It starts off subtle, with his clothes no longer fitting him and his wedding ring slipping off, but soon he becomes too small to ignore. For shots like this, they used forced perspective, having the actors sit at a different distance from camera than the others, a method that was used heavily on Lord of the Rings to make Gandalf interact with Frodo. An even trickier scene was when Scott fights off a spider. Oh. To go that small, they had to create some oversized sets and props, like a 15-foot mousetrap or a 40-pound pair of scissors. At the end of the movie, Scott realizes that his shrinking will never stop. What awaits him as he becomes so small? The microscopic becomes the infinite. Before Ant-Man did the quantum realm, Shrinking Man seeded the idea. But now, let's move over to a subgenre of shrinking, going inside the human body. Fantastic Voyage from 1966 introduced a submarine crew that shrinks down and is injected into a dying scientist in order to save him from a blood clot. Back then, technology hadn't quite caught up to the film's ambitions, and you can see they had trouble merging the actors with the background.
Background is kind of what we call scissoring.
I'm sorry, what? And when they weren't using large glass tanks to create the bloodstream footage, they actually built out enormous sets for the actors to float through. But since they didn't have the technology to remove the wires they were attached to, they just painted them the same color as the background, wobbled the camera, and blurred the hell out of everything so you wouldn't see them. Clever ways to deal with the problem they just didn't have the tools for yet. But almost 20 years later, in 1987, a little movie called Inner Space would take that same idea to a whole other level. After a tiny Dennis Quaid gets injected into Martin Short's ass, it starts a miniature adventure of epic proportions. To make the human body of Inner Space as believable as possible, they built out this huge track with water running through it and placed in a model of the ship to look like it was traveling through the inside of a vein. But the creativity didn't stop there. When the bad guys are shrunk to 50% of their size, they start attacking our heroes in a wild car chase.
Stop this car!
Feeling down? Instant faan sa crunchy layers at sweet.
Significant little pipsqueak, I'm in charge here.
To get all this to work, they cut a car in half and built the back seat at 4 times the size. This looked all right for the most part. But what about when big and small characters had to interact with each other? They built enormous puppets for the bad guys to grab onto, and tiny ones for the good guys to throw around. For the time, this clever camera trickery won the film an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, and in a way, predicted the rise of nanotechnology.
Everything, instead of getting more complicated and bigger, everything got smaller. Computers used to take up huge rooms, and now they take up this.
He's got a point. Just think about what phones used to look like. These days, they're way smaller. And now on to everyone's childhood favorite, the Magic School Bus.
Seatbelts, everyone!
No one else was already wearing a seatbelt?
In the second episode of the first season, the class shrinks down to the size of a cheesy weasel and gets eaten by fellow classmate Arnold.
Arnold?
And although the class would shrink in later episodes, there was just something about this one that stuck with me, even though there was this shot where Arnold is inside Arnold. But whatever, I'll let that slide. They pass through his mouth, then his esophagus. How did he survive this? Before entering his stomach. This episode is more nasty than I remember. But as a kid, I learned way more from Miss Frizzle than I ever did from my own teachers. Voiced by Lily Tomlin, who was no stranger to being small, the eccentric instructor never missed an opportunity to teach and inspire, even if she was about to literally die. So how did they create such wild and vivid ideas, like microscopic students swimming around in digestive juice? It took a huge team of people, from writers to scientists, working out the script and storyboards. A colorful cast of kids lending their voices.
What's happening?
What's going on? Whoa!
Oh, bad, bad, bad!
And talented artists to illustrate the iconic characters. Fun fact, to paint the more than 20,000 frames for a single episode, they would send off a portion of the work to Seoul, Korea, where an army of artists would finish every background and photograph it all, look familiar, to create a workable episode. And even while that was going on, Foley artists had to use different household objects to create all kinds of wacky sound effects. No, let them cook. In 1989, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids would change the shrinking genre forever. When the Zelensky kids and their neighbors are accidentally shrunken down to the size of insects, their unsuspecting dad starts sweeping up the mess. After an enormous studio was used to build out just one tiny section of the floorboard, a giant broom made out of foam required a team of people to move it. When it came time to be dumped into a garbage bag, the actors slid down a humongous pink slide along oversized props, with more dangerous shots left to stunt doubles. Their dad takes the trash out just a few feet, but to the kids, it might as well have been miles. They cut open the bag to reveal the eerie and alien world of their own backyard, where they can slide down blades of grass, spend the night in giant Lego bricks, and find a hearty meal by eating a massive leftover cookie. Can you imagine